just got off the plane and I'm here in Wisconsin. And oh, I have another testimony that I have to share. So I had two encounters while I was on the plane, and the first plane that was coming out of where I was flying from into Chicago, and then Chicago to Wisconsin. But I got to share with you this last encounter because I had just been praying and praying and praying, and so I sit down, and there's this guy here. His name is Dan, and we just started chit-chatting. So part of the thing, one of the good ways to bridge that gap with opening the door, if you feel like, I don't know what to say, and you're struggling a little bit, and obviously pray and be walking in the Spirit, but there is I think what's called an acronym for it. So it starts off, you talk about family, occupation, recreation, then you give your testimony, and so there's a whole acronym that you can follow that will help people evangelize. So I started talking about what he did for a living. He told me about his job. And then I saw the ring on his finger, and I said, "Oh, do you have any kids?" He said, "No." I said, "Are you married?" And he said, "I'm going through a divorce." And I knew right away that the Lord had put me there for a reason. I knew right away. I said, "Oh man, I'm sorry." I said, "How many years were you married?" And he told me that he was married for, I think, like 18 years. And I said, "Yeah, I know. I know. I can't believe God put me next to this guy. I just, I said, I know. It feels like your limb is being cut off. Like you're losing an appendage." And he's like, "Yeah." And I could just see and feel. I could see and feel. I said, I went through a divorce myself, and I said, I still grieve. I mean, it's been 3 years and I still grieve. And I said, the only thing that got me through was Jesus. And he said, "Well, I don't know where I'm at right now with," I said, that's okay. But I said, what you're going through is tough. So we talked about that at length, and he shared with me what he was experiencing with his wife. And you can tell the guy loves his wife. And I'm sure she loves him, but he's away a lot. I said, "What do you think happened?" And he said, "Well, she just fell out of love with me." And man, I don't know how that happens. I don't know. We're not nurturing. We're not feeding our marriages. We're not feeding these marriages, and we shouldn't be falling out of love. And what do you mean falling out of love? It should be a commitment, a covenant between God. And I've learned a lot about marriage, but I get that. I get that now. So I felt bad for him, absolutely. And then he said he's away a lot. He's away a lot. And I said, as a woman, it would be tough for me to have my husband away, the man I love, to be away all the time. I said, us women, we need that. We need you to be physically there. I said I would take I would take a job that was less paying as long as my husband was here home with me. I said I'd want nothing more than be with him. And so I said, did you talk about like quitting your job? He says, yeah. And I think, they're just to that point. People just get to that point. And I know what that point is like. It's devastating. And there's nothing you can do to change the other person's mind. It just seems like. But I did witness to him, and I did tell him my story and how the Lord became my husband, because I said I needed a husband, and he became my husband. I said he's given me joy and peace and comfort. And he's been my everything. And I said, without that, I wouldn't have gotten through the divorce. So then I asked him, I said, "Can I pray for you?" And I prayed for Dan. And when I opened my eyes, he was crying. He was crying. And I knew, I said, "You know what, Dan? God put me here for you today. He put me here for you today." And because I prayed, I said, the stuff that poured out, it said, I'm like, "Lord, I know you put me here today. Dan may not know you and may not have a relationship with you, but you put me here to tell him that there is hope, that you are here, that he is your hope, he is your resource, he is the one who can take this burden from you. He is the one who can, if he quits his job, you find him another job. you are the one, you are the source of everything. And so that, he cried and he was teary-eyed. So I gave him a book, an inspiration book that I said, this has a chapter in it about husbands and wives. I said, read it. It did help me. And I said, I don't know what the Lord's plan is for you and your wife. I know, for me and my husband, he separated us. But the Lord had a different plan for me. But for you, don't. I said, just pray. Stay on your knees and pray. There is always hope. Okay, so this is kind of an addendum to that testimony that I filmed over at the airport, because I meditate on that divine encounter. Wow, there were things that, as I recount this story, that is so powerful that I really wanted to add to it, because this is now like, I think I've been here like 2 days, and you'll see the videos. I've got Mario and I got my mom and everybody, but I wanted to really get this up, and because I'm actually going to be witnessing to the church tomorrow on Sabbath and sharing this powerful story. So when I talked about sitting next to Dan, the first thing that happened is he had earplugs in, and he was bending forward, and I didn't know if he could hear me, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? How you doing? This is me, Starry. How you doing? And he took the earplugs out, and he's like, and I said, oh, how you doing? And he's like, oh, yeah, good. So I asked him, I said, is your final destination Wassa? He says, no, it's actually Minocqua. And that was, this is how divine God is, because it wasn't without coincidence that I worked in Minocqua. I was a nurse in Minocqua. I used to live outside of Minocqua. I mean, I know Minocqua. So it was so cool, because he said, oh no, I'm going to Minocqua. And, I live in Minocqua. And I'm like, what? And I said, I used to live in Minocqua. And he's like, I said, where do you live? And he says, oh, I live over by Mama's restaurant. And he said, but it's not called Mama's anymore. I'm like, no way, it's not called Mama's anymore. He's like, no, they changed it. And he's like, in fact, I just bought a house over on this road. And I'm like, oh, I know where that is. And he's like, yeah. And then I'm like, well, what do you do for a living? And it was interesting, because he was some type of, I don't know, it was like a laser medical, and he had just gotten back from New York City. He says, yeah, I travel a lot. I'm like gone for a month, but I get to go to all these cool locations. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Now you heard my testimony when I talked to him about being away from his wife. So little did I know that the Holy Spirit, as it was giving me the questions I don't know where these questions came from, as the Holy Spirit flooded into me, God knew exactly what questions needed to be poised to him, to guide him into that holy divine conversation. It was all the Lord. It was all the Lord. So that's where the subject of, he started talking about the traveling and buying the house. And later on, I found out that, he's like, when I just bought this house, and he's like, 3 days later, my wife comes home and she says, I want a divorce. And he's like, what? And can you imagine? It's like being hit from the side with a bat. I mean, the impact of that, and I'm like, what? And I knew. And he's like, yeah, she just said she didn't love me anymore. And I mean, I felt, this is the thing about our suffering and our trials. When God allows, there's so many reasons why God allows, right? But one of the reasons why he allows is so that we have a testimony, and that we can identify with the people that God is going to use us with. Here I am, I went through this traumatic divorce, 24 years. I know that pain. And then when someone says they don't love you anymore, and the Lord praise the Lord, saved me from that, and I am healed and I am whole, and but as I was going through that, I could feel his pain and where he was at. So, that is the important thing that we must remember when you're going through a trial. It's never without a cause and a reason, and one of it is to draw us closer to Christ, obviously, but he's also preparing us to be able to minister to other people. So, but the thing is, after I asked him those questions, now this was the Holy Spirit, and I didn't record this earlier, but my eyes fell on his hand. I don't look at people's hands. I'm not looking. Why would I look at his hand? And I noticed his ring. I would have never, ever thought about seeing that ring. That was the Holy Spirit. So I looked and I saw the ring, and I just looked over. I said, "You got any kids?" What a question to ask. I've never asked anybody in my entire life if they had kids. And so you can see where the Holy Spirit led my eyes. And then he said, "No." And then I said, "Are you married?" I was assuming he was married. Obviously, he's got a ring on the finger. And that's when he said, "I'm going through a divorce." And then I'm like, oh man. And that's when he just started, we just started talking. And then when I told him that I went through a divorce, and I said, "Yeah, it's like the limb being cut off," he's like, "Yeah, yes, yes." And I knew right away the pain that he was going through. And, in the course of that conversation, when he said, "My wife, when I got this new job, we got a house, we got all these things." They had a lot of things. It sounded like he had some money. He was making good money. And I can see as a man, he's thinking, "I'm providing. And he's like, "But she was happy with that, me being gone." But then she started just saying, "When you coming home? When you coming home? When you coming home?" Like she was nagging almost. And that's when I said, I knew the Holy Spirit was like, oh, I was grieved. I was like, "Oh, you're not seeing it. You're not seeing that she loves you and she wants you home. She wants you home. We are created to be one flesh. We're not created to be separated like that." And when we're separated, that's when the enemy can come in. That's why men and women, God created us to be part of each other. And when we separate, we are separated from that union and that power and that protection. There's no longer any protection. There just isn't. Not a month at a time, weeks at a time. So, yeah, that was part of what the Lord, and that's why I poured out, like, how us women, how we think. And, I knew that his wife still loved him, but they had gone down. I told him, he said, "I'm trying, and it seems like we're on two different paths." I said, "It's like two sidewalks that don't cross anymore." And he's like, "Yeah, it's like two sidewalks that don't cross." So there were such divine things that happened during that conversation, and it was all led by the Holy Spirit. So I wanted to go over that just a little bit now that I've had time to think about it and pray on it and have it sink in, because I want you to get the impact. Because when I prayed for him, what came out of my mouth was divinely inspired. And when I opened my eyes, and here's a man who said, "I don't know, I don't really know about, I don't know about Jesus right now," but he wanted me to pray. And then when I did, he was weeping. That's what God can do when he uses us. And that's what God is doing when he's working through us in our daily lives and we're going through these trials. Just remember, he is preparing us to be a witness, to have a testimony, so that we can show people his divine power, his faithfulness, and his love for us. He loves us so much. So plant a seed if you can. Pray for the Holy Spirit to empower you, and ask for those divine appointments. He will bring them. He will bring them. All right. God bless. And I'm in Wisconsin. The next video you will see will be the family and Mario. All right. Have a great 4th, my friends. And